My name is Marilyn McFarland. I was born to William and Gertrude Martin along with my younger brother William and sister Carolyn in Bay City, Michigan. My great-grandparents immigrated from Germany, Scotland, and England. In fact, my great-grandfather, who was from Scotland, was a contractor, and I actually live in the house he built. It is almost 100 years old, and it's only 4 blocks from the home where I was raised. And until my mom passed away, she just lived 4 blocks from me, and she just recently passed away at age 93. I live with my husband, who is a physician, and all of our pets. We've raised Labrador retrievers all of our married lives. From the front porch, I can see the church, the Methodist church where I was baptized and married. And from my back door, I can see the high school from where I graduated. I always tell people, I never got far, just 4 blocks. I then moved to Detroit after high school and earned my diploma in nursing from Henry Ford Hospital School of Nursing, and then earned my Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Wayne State University. Meanwhile, I worked as a registered nurse at Henry Ford Hospital on various medical, surgical, and orthopedic wards, where I met my husband, who was an orthopedic surgery resident at the time. We now have been married for 48 years. In the early 1990s, I returned once again to Wayne to pursue my doctorate in nursing, my PhD, where I was serendipitously assigned to Dr. Marilyn Leininger as my faculty advisor. She introduced me to the discipline of transcultural nursing and thereby broadened my worldview, which changed the course of my professional life and helped me redefine my life goals. Subsequently, I became Dr. Leininger's graduate teaching assistant, and I also was her research assistant. And after earning my PhD with a focus in transcultural nursing, her partner in research and authorship. We traveled nationally and globally, conducted studies, published and lectured together until her death in 2012. I also became credentialed as a certified transcultural nurse at the advanced level, and in 1993 received the Leininger Award for Excellence in Transcultural Nursing. And in 1994, I was a recipient of the Leininger Transcultural Nursing Award for Excellence and Creative Leadership in Transcultural Nursing. In 2003, my practice took a different turn and I enrolled in the nurse practitioner program at Saginaw Valley, obtaining my nurse practitioner certification as a family nurse practitioner in 2006. Then I held adjunct positions as dissertation committee members at several universities or colleges of nursing nationwide and joined the nursing faculty at the University of Michigan Flint in 2006 as an associate professor. And today I continue to teach there as a professor of nursing. In addition to publishing numerous book chapters and articles, I co-authored 2 texts with Dr. Marilyn Leininger, Transcultural Nursing Concepts, Theories, Research, and Practice in 2002, which was a recipient of the 2003 American Journal of Nursing's Book of the Year Award. And in 2006, we co-authored the theory text, Culture, Care, Diversity, and Universality, a Worldwide Nursing Theory. With Dr. Leininger, I co-presented the 2011 keynote address at the 37th Annual Transcultural Nursing Society International Conference in Las Vegas. I'm a member of the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties, the Michigan Council of Nurse Practitioners, lifelong member of the American Nurses Association. As a career-long member of Sigma Theta Tau International, I'm very active in our local Pi Delta chapter at U of M Flint. Published in 2015, I co-authored the 3rd edition of Leininger's Culture, Care, Diversity, and Universality, a Worldwide Nursing Theory with Dr. Hiba Weba Alama, a former student for whom I was a mentor and now share course teaching and research as a colleague. In fact, Dr. Leininger, at the end of her life, passed the responsibility for carrying on her work specifically to Dr. Hiba and myself. I have studied, practiced, consulted, and lectured throughout the United States and in various parts of Europe, Kenya, Taiwan, Australia, and conducted transcultural research studies focused on Polish, Anglo-American, African-American, Mexican-American, and German-American elders using Leininger's culture care theory. My main scholarly interests include the scholarship of teaching and learning, the translation of culturally congruent, evidence-based research into clinical practice, and the integration of transcultural nursing theory into nurse practitioner practice across the lifespan in diverse settings. Currently, Dr. Hiba Weba Alama and I are finishing the publication of the 4th edition of Leininger's Transcultural Nursing Concepts, Theories, Research, and Practices. Together with Dr. Margaret Andrews, who is a transcultural nursing scholar and the director of our department at the University of Michigan Flint, our next venture will be an ethnohistorical study of past and present transcultural nursing scholars and their contributions to the discipline and practice of nursing.
Well, Marilyn, I'm so glad that you've agreed to do this interview, and I was so excited to meet you after all these years.
We have worked together for so long, written and emailed and everything.
That's right.
It was great.
That's right.
Yeah, it is great.
And I know the viewers are going to be so pleased to hear you talk about the work that you have done and the work that you have done with Madeline over the years and extending her work. We remember her fondly, and so I'm just so glad that they're going to be able to hear that from you and in your own words, and so we're eager for that. And the first thing I want to do is have you share with our viewers about how it did all get started. So just bring us along with that.
Actually, it's an interesting story. And I met Marilyn Leininger for the first time when I applied to the PhD program at Wayne State University in Detroit. And I had finished my master's at Wayne State and had really focused my research on the elderly and their care, but I had been very much focused in the quantitative paradigm. I was doing research in nursing homes already at that time and had struggled a bit. And so I was serendipitously, assigned to go talk to Marilyn Leininger. She was going to be my advisor. And it just happened, and it changed my professional life. And I walked into her office, and she had asked me to send some things I had written. And I sent her some of my papers, and I figured a pretty good writer. And she made that comment. She said, well, you write fairly well, but how is this research with elders working out? And I said, well, I've used these Likert scales with these elders, and I'm looking at life in a nursing home, and I'm looking at the concept of territory and personal space, and I've been using a Likert scale, and the elders are struggling with that a bit, and they can't.
They do have trouble with Likert.
Right. I mean, we were raised on Likert scales, but at this time in the late 80s, early 90s, this generation of elders, it was completely foreign to them. And I was coming to that notion, and she said, I think you should think about approaching this differently. And she said, maybe we could work together. And she said, tell me a little bit more about that. And I said, well, you know what happened? One of my subjects, an elderly woman, I was trying to get her to fill out this Likert scale about what it was like to live in one room and give up your home. And she said to me, sit down if you want to hear my story, and I'll tell you what it's like living there. And Madeline says, there's the answer. You have to come and work with me. So we got started, and we talked about qualitative research and about culture care theory, how we had to know the context of their lives, and that's how it all got started.
And see, I didn't know about that early work of yours because it's so similar to some things I've done. So that's fascinating to me because I was looking at changing the environment in Rogers. I'm looking at what happens to the elderly when they've had a beautiful big home and lots of things, and their home is all gone and so forth. So we have that in common, that concern about that.
Yeah.
Well, and so you were at Wayne, and you did your PhD.
I did. I worked with Madeline, and I sort of consider the time I was at Wayne in the late 80s, and I graduated in 1995, really the golden years of the culture care theory and qualitative research. She had a cadre of students And she brought us along. She had a plan, and she was a very powerful, influential woman at this time. She was a full professor in anthropology and in nursing. And we considered her sort of like our Moses. And she would walk into our lounge, the Cone Lounge at events, and people would just stand back, and we just lined up behind her because, you needed a strong person to finish your dissertation. And Madeline took care of her students, and we all graduated on time.
Those are parallels, with Martha Rogers and us.
They were they knew each other well.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Martha coming to Wayne State?
They respected each other.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Different perspectives, but some similarities, some differences. And she actually brought Martha to Wayne State, and we spent time with her.
Yeah. Well, and so now bring us further up to date with what you're doing.
Okay. I have.
Well, you did. Excuse me, but you did the book with her.
Right. I did a lot of work with her after graduation. In fact, she just passed away about 4 years ago. And up until that time, even though she lived in Omaha, Nebraska, I lived in Bay City, Michigan, we have worked together, traveled the world together. We co-authored 2 books together. We did presentations internationally, locally. We were both involved in the Transcultural Nursing Society. We presented our work. And we really shared for a very long time work with the culture care theory. And she had always told me, and I sort of knew that I would carry on this work and that I was sort of in charge of that, but there would be other people involved. But she really looked to me, and I'm not even quite sure why. I was just so intrigued with the theory. And the theory, she said to me once, she said, "You live that theory." And I said, "It informs my practice, my research, my teaching. It is a part of who I am professionally," and really gave me a worldview. Very broad worldview. I was raised in Bay City. It's a small town in mid-Michigan, but she really was instrumental in reshaping my professional goals.
That's really interesting. Well, she's known far and wide, and it's interesting. Years ago, I was in a meeting, Robert Wood Johnson presentation. And this person was talking about culture. This was in South Florida. And he was talking about culture, and he put this stuff up on the board or the slide. And I looked at it and I thought, well, that's Leininger, So he didn't say anything about Leininger.
That has happened.
It was a physician presenting, and I went up and talked with him afterward, and he said, "Oh yes, I should mention that. It's Madeline Leininger's work." And he said, "We base a lot on Madeline Leininger's work and Robert Wood Johnson." So.
Well, I think other disciplines value her work, not always cited perhaps as it should be. And we actually have moved to put our the Leininger collection. There's a Leininger collection at Florida Atlantic University. It's open to scholars from every discipline. And we also have developed an online resource that people can access to use her work in Creative Commons. And so people can go in and use her work, and the only requirement is that it be cited. And that was really to carry out her mission of having her work live on. And of course it lives on in the work that I do. I have a colleague, Dr. Hiba Waybil Lama, who is actually from Lebanon, who's on the faculty. She's lived here for many years in the U.S. And she and I worked together. In fact, we're with Madeline at the end, and she formally charged us with going forward. And Dr. Hiba's quite a bit younger than I am, so I looked to her for the next generation, and Madeline realized that. So it has been profoundly it's a profound responsibility to be charged with this.
Yes.
And at times I thought, how is this all going to go? But I think being in an academic setting and able to influence students who are the future, really, and how this has led me to prepare nurses in advanced practice and to really teach them about the theory, about transcultural nursing, about culture. I've really been able to influence them, and so has Hiba.
Well, that's fascinating to hear about how this has developed and how you have developed. I'm interested in your own work in her work. Does that make sense? Say a little bit about that.
Right, and as I told you before, it's profoundly influenced my practice, my teaching, and my scholarship. And in terms of practice, I'm a family nurse practitioner, and for my entire career as a nurse practitioner, I have practiced with the underserved, caring for the underserved, where cultural context is so important. I have taken care of people from the inner city. When I talk to people about preventative care and how to take care of themselves, I have to be so careful in understanding the cultural context, which includes their daily life ways. And it has made me very acutely aware that I cannot tell people to eat more vegetables if they live in a food desert, or they can't walk 30 minutes most days if the neighborhood's unsafe. So we have to figure these things out. And that theory, the culture care theory, has so assisted me in designing care, co-developing care. I think one of the major contributions that Madeline made with her theory, it has actually not only influenced us in transcultural nursing who practice, but it's influenced a policy focus where patients and families are active participants in their own care, that we need to seek out how they are doing things, how are they approaching care, what are they doing correctly. You know, in the theory we talk about care modes, and one of the care modes is preserving and maintaining. We don't need to start with what they're doing wrong. We need to start with what's going well, what is part of their daily lives that we can support. If they're caring for an elder at home, good, how can we support that? If something needs to be changed, we have in the theory what's called an accommodation or a negotiation. You know, where can we give a little, where can we preserve a little of their doing, where can we meet halfway? And then if something has to be changed, we refer to that mode as culture care repatterning. And my advice to students I teach and to other nurses I work with, tread carefully. Because when you make drastic changes, the chances of them following this are going to be remote at best. You have to be very respectful. I have a student now doing her doctoral project in Nigeria. She's a native from Nigeria, and she is working with mothers and grandmothers to encourage the cessation of female genital circumcision. This is a profoundly sensitive topic. In the past, young women in rural parts of Nigeria did not have options other than marriage, and if this was not something carried out, then they were shunned almost. But times are changing, and she's gone back, and with the World Health Organization materials, she's teaching about the health hazards of this, and then also pointing out there are new opportunities for women that weren't there before. So she said, it was even called in some of the health literature female genital mutilation. And we had this long discussion, and we came to the conclusion, and she agreed that this was pretty judgmental term. So she's calling it female genital circumcision as a more culturally sensitive term.
Well, that's true, because the women that have been taught that, and that's all they've known all their life, that was an expectation. Right. There's an attachment to the meaning of all that, even though it seems abhorrent to us.
Right.
But to them, it has meaning.
Right, meaning, and also serious implications if it's done or not done. So you have to tread very carefully when you're making these drastic changes and recommendations to people. I think she's doing a wonderful project, and it's guided by the culture care theory. We spent almost 2.5 years together in the doctoral program, and where she was prepared to go, because you need to understand culture from both a generic or a individual perspective, which she had, but you also need the professional preparation in using the theory and understanding transcultural approaches in order to be able to give care and carry out any kind of a project.
Now, students that I have worked with, just as they were in my courses, and they might have selected Leininger's work to have really used the model or the design or the, she finally called that, what, an enabler?
She called it an enabler. Originally it was the
sunshine.
The sunrise.
Sunrise.
She called it the sunrise model.
Yeah.
And what it is, she always said it was the rising sun.
And it looks like
it looks like the rising sun. And it has all the social structure factors across the top, which gives you the cultural context of care. And then care is very central. For Marilyn, it was central to the theory. And in my own personal belief, care is central to the discipline of nursing. And I think it's unique to nursing, not that other professions don't care, but I think by the centrality of it. I think that's what's unique about care and nursing, because it's a very core.
Well, I think what we offer is different than what others who might be doing caring, but they care about other things or in different ways than nurses do. Well, so I was interested, thinking that perhaps people viewing this would wonder, now, are you using that in your practice?
I am.
You probably know it by now. You don't have to look at it anymore. But
well, I'm actually practicing in a health department. I'm doing, because I'm a full-time faculty, I have a practice a few hours a week, and sometimes a little more at sometimes, and I cover sometimes in a pediatric practice and also in a women's health practice in a health department. And for all of my career, I've worked with people who are generally underserved. And so the theory is particularly useful to me as I look at their cultural background and what their beliefs and values are. And, in pediatrics, I'm looking at mothers and grandmothers, many of them who are raising children, grandmothers who are raising children now. And it's so important to understand what their beliefs are, what their resources are. And I'm so impressed when they come in that the children are so well taken care of. And they're very interested in having that professional knowledge. But I always ask them to tell me how you're doing this. How are you managing the children? I always try to understand the neighborhood, where they're coming from, what their resources are, and pay close attention to whether they can even pay for the copay on some social service programs. So, the theory informs my practice.
Now, let's think about it with regard to like education. You've certainly already talked about the fact that it's very embedded in the curricula where you are. And are there other places like that?
Yes, Dr. Sandra Mixer is at UT Knoxville. And she is just finished some work with a student who went to Kenya and worked with the Maasai tribe. And she actually used Marilyn's theory to go in and discover about how the people were caring for each other with malaria. And malaria care is very interesting. There have been so many programs, and they've tried to eradicate this with teaching, with offering many interventions, with spraying some areas, and it persists as a really global health threat. And when Sandy was preparing the student in Madeline's theory to take a look at this, we came across a book written by an anthropologist who had gone in and done a study, and she said actually, was a woman, she said, the people sometimes don't consider this a major issue. What they really, if you ask them, what could make your life better? sometimes malaria or the eradication of malaria is not even brought up. And the three top things they mentioned: a bicycle, a bucket to carry water in, and then they said, well, if we could have a bicycle, a bucket, and then maybe clean water, that probably would be what we would want. So malaria care was kind of finally down on the bottom, you know. So she went, her student, Cecily Strang, Dr. Cecily Strang now, went to Kenya, and they had a history of working with the Maasai as missionaries for the Presbyterian Church. And so she went back as a researcher and did this qualitative study with Madeleine's theory and really discovered how they cared for each other with malaria, how they viewed malaria, what they thought could be done about malaria. It was really fascinating, and she discovered some new care constructs with the theory about malaria care. So in education, it's embedded in the curriculum, but we're very individually involved with students and their research. And we bring them along as future contributors. Now, that article that Dr. Strang wrote and Dr. Mixer wrote is now published in the Journal of Transcultural Nursing.
Oh, okay.
So we're building knowledge with the culture care theory and knowledge for practice, because we are a practice discipline. We have an obligation to practice.
So that's happening in different places.
It is.
As
It is.
People, individual people working either on doctorates, I suppose, or masters.
Right. In fact, Dr. Rick Zuha, who's a professor at Duquesne, has a very, in fact, I've served on some of the dissertation committees. We do that for each other. And he has prepared a lot of nurses who are, some of them advanced practice, some of them are faculty, and has prepared them with the theory. And they are contributing to the body of knowledge and practice. But a new focus that because I was prepared as a PhD doctorate, with a PhD doctorate, we're now at the University of Michigan, Flint, granting the Doctor of Nursing Practice, which is a practice degree. So the projects, or the focus of the scholarly project has morphed somewhat. And we are looking more at practice projects where we, instead of discovering new findings, we're looking at the findings that have been discovered with the culture care theory, for instance.
To be used.
Used, you know, sometimes, what is the stat, like even in the statistics say, sometimes it's 17 years before something gets into nursing practice from the literature.
Or it doesn't get in at all.
Right, and the physicians and pharmacists and the rest of the healthcare providers are in the same boat, you know.
Right.
So our focus is take the findings and implement these. And that's where my student went to Nigeria to try and change the views about female circumcision based on the evidence about how to bring about that change in a culturally competent way. So it has fit nicely, and I think it's important. And you can also build scholarship, not only with the research or discovery, but with translational science. You can still build practice knowledge. And the theory, and unless you have a theory, in my view, to guide this, it's very difficult to build one study on another or to build that body of knowledge. And the theory, as many people around the country and some international scholars have built on each other's work. We keep expanding that list of care constructs book after book because different people are doing different things in different parts of the country, different parts of the world.
So that's really exciting. And for you, that's all happened since your doctorate.
Right, which is
that's
about 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, now, the other thing I was wondering, I want to be sure that people viewing would have the information that they might want based on some of what you're sharing. So now, you mentioned this society, the
Cultural Nursing Society.
Transcultural Nursing. Now, how large of a group is that?
We have about, I think, 750 active members.
Okay.
We have a meeting every year. You can get onto the website, tcns.org.
Okay.
And it opens up. In fact, there's a lot of theorists who have actually, there's Madeline and her work. Some of my work is there. Some of Dr. Hibba's work is there. And also the other theorists who have done work in transcultural nursing. And many of them acknowledge Madeline, even though they've gone on and developed their own theory, like Dr. D. Ray.
Yeah.
They certainly acknowledge Madeline as a piece of this, of inspiration for them to go forward. Even though they reconceptualized it and developed their own theory, Madeline really, I think, was the person who got this all started in nursing with a focus on culture and was a leader in developing transcultural nursing.
Well, and we're living at a time that as the whole world becomes global,
Right.
and we have a global consciousness and certainly global literature of nursing.
Right.
I think I mentioned to you as I'm working on this new edition of the book, Nursing Theorists and Their Work, it's fascinating to me that every chapter have all these global international references and even journals that many journals published here in the United States have international articles in them, and that has just it was happening, but right now it seems like it's gone and happened more rapidly.
Well, I think the internet and the progress that's been made with getting online, and I have worked, for instance, with Dr. Akram O'Mary, who has done a lot of work in transcultural nursing in Australia. We actually co-edited a book together, and it was all done, online. And some of the authors in my books have been from other countries, and it's not that we're getting together face to face very often anyway. No. It's all done online.
Yeah.
I mean, I teach online, and I can. And I think we were even having a conversation. Some of my students are even practicing online as advanced practice nurses doing telehealth.
Yeah.
So I think that has really brought a global focus, and I think we're offering a lot to the world, but we're benefiting from all of the work that's being done globally that we can share and learn from each other.
Yeah. So it's just amazing what is happening. And that global theme and culture is incredibly important as we learn to respect each other and understand each other and grow together.
Well, and I think some of the discussions we've had about students having an opportunity to go abroad and practice and to really learn firsthand about another culture and how that has to be so carefully done, and that's another way I use the theory, is when I'm going to take a group abroad or some of my faculty, we actually have classes with the students about how to approach this experience for a whole semester before they go. And when I teach the classes, and some of my colleagues have also used the theory, but I've used the theory, to talk to them about how you go abroad and you're going to learn as much as you're going to teach, and it's going to be very much a shared caring experience. And it truly is, and it really broadens their worldview and gives them a certain cultural sense of being culturally sensitive with people who may have very different in their beliefs and have different resources. And it's very transformative for them. But I go back to those three modes that Madeline developed in her theory. First, what are they doing right? Secondly, where can we negotiate? And third, tread very carefully when you are going to suggest the American way to change. That often doesn't fit. You know that from working abroad.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think being in another culture gives you a whole appreciation, actually, of your own culture, too.
Oh, right.
You see culture in a different way. Where before you really don't think about it, I guess.
Well, the full title of the theory is the Theory of Culture, Care, Diversity, and Universality. And Madeline was very insightful because she's thinking about how are we alike and how are we different. And I always think of the commonalities that she's reaching out to discover in her theory as sort of the cultural glue that holds us together as a human family. And then I think about the diversities are important. You need to honor those, you need to work those in, but you can often reach people when you have common ground. We all value our families, our spiritual or religious beliefs. Those are things where you can meet people and establish a bond, and then you can deal with the differences if you have to make changes and give care.
Now, was she one that said we were more alike than different? Humans are more alike than different, and yet those differences are
very important.
Yeah,
right, especially in healthcare.
I think she said that. Well, it's just exciting, and I know everyone will be so pleased, and I want to thank you for agreeing to do
thanks
this
for the
interview.
opportunity to talk about Madeline and her work and the way that we're carrying out the work with the theory. I really appreciate it.
She'd be pleased. Wouldn't she?
I'm sure she's probably she's probably knowing about this.
Oh, yes.
And probably being very pleased with the whole thing.
She's got heaven organized.
I'm sure.
She was a powerhouse.
Right, I know she bargained many times with God and about her work and her life, and she was a powerful person,
yes,
and influential person.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.